tall one.
Backpack I can get into.
Those.
Yeah.
Do we want the pair?
I feel like short people should hide in the background.
You good? All right. Are we all good? Good morning, guys. Well, good morning, and thank you all for being here. This is our monthly media briefing for the month of October. As all of you know, I like to do these every month to provide an update on some of the work that we're doing here at City Hall, look ahead at what's to come in the month ahead, and then, of course, to offer an opportunity to answer any questions you all may have on any subject. That said, I want to start by marking and highlighting the city's recent legislative successes at our state and federal levels. As many of you know, a key priority of my administration is to ensure that we're getting our fair share of resources from all levels of government. In addition, we are the 8th largest city in the country, the 2nd largest in California, and we have to punch at our weight when it comes to advocating for our city's interests. Last week marked the end of the legislative session up in the state capitol, with the governor signing nearly 1,000 new bills, and Congress will wrap up its session by the end of the year. And I want to now highlight all the accomplishments made to date because there's much for our city to be proud of. With me today are Adrian Granda, our Director of Government Affairs and the city's lead on state government issues, Walt Bishop, who is our Deputy Director of Government Affairs and the liaison to our federal government, Keith Corey, who's our Senior Grants Manager, and Brittany Bailey, who is our Grants Manager. With it not able to be here today is Dion Akers, who's also part of the Government Affairs team focusing on regional government. Over the past 2 years, we have stood with elected officials from the state and federal governments, often thanking them for helping us to secure funding for things like water reliability investments, climate initiatives, major park and library upgrades, violence prevention programs, and border infrastructure. That list goes on and on. We could be here all morning. I want to underline for San Diegans that these funds don't just appear unsolicited. The checks don't just show up in the mail because we asked. We have to do the work of persuading these other levels of government that the funding that we're asking for is worthy, both because the initiative is in line with greater state and federal goals, but because we can be trusted to deploy these resources efficiently and effectively. And that's what this small but mighty team behind me of our Department of Government Affairs does on behalf of the people of San Diego. This is identifying potential funding opportunities, writing and submitting grant proposals, forging alliances with San Diego's delegations both in Sacramento and in Washington, D.C., as well as key members of the governor and the president's administrations, constant advocacy during the budget process in Congress and in the state legislature to make sure that the funding that we're seeking gets secured and across the finish line. And so today, I'm pleased to report that because of this persistent work by this team of professionals, the city has achieved an incredible 62% increase in grant funding awarded over the prior fiscal year and 172% increase since the year 2019. This is remarkable. It equates to $229 million secured by the city of San Diego. Now, this $229 million will go toward projects such as enhancing water reliability through our Pure Water program, emergency response preparedness, economic development, homeless services, road and bridge repair, and public safety. To help put this number in perspective, in 2019, the city applied for $134 million in grants and was awarded $84 million. This year, we applied for $258 million in grants and were awarded $229 million. So we're not only applying for more grants, but we're doing so more effectively than ever, winning a larger portion of those grants that we apply for. And most of all, we're pulling down our fair share. One grant that I want to highlight is one that was announced just a couple of weeks ago. The U.S. Department of Transportation awarded our region $150 million towards the construction of a new Otay Mesa East port of entry, something that our binational mega region has worked hard on for years. And if you're wondering what I do when I go visit Washington, D.C., I can tell you that making the case for border infrastructure and staffing is one of the issues at the forefront. And the success in this regard is emblematic of the groundbreaking work that our federal affairs team is doing on our behalf. In addition, it is important to point out that not long ago, the city received just shy of $300 million in American Rescue Plan Act dollars. This helped us to stabilize the city's budget and keep city workers on the job, maintain service levels in our neighborhoods, and invest in our city's historically disadvantaged communities. I want to be clear that this year's fiscal year budget would have been a very grim affair without this help from the Biden administration and from Congress. That critical funding from ARPA was followed by the passage of the bipartisan infrastructure law, which has also provided the opportunity for the city and the region to rebuild our aging and neglected infrastructure. And I want to inform the public that we're going after these dollars a bit differently than we've done in the past. Under Walt's leadership, we have built an unprecedented coalition of regional partners, making sure that we advance the best projects that we have in the San Diego region and making sure that our priorities get funded. At the state level, I want to point out that we got $87 million in direct funding out of our latest state budget. That's about $3 million more than last year. And those dollars will be used for funding priorities like pure water, the replacement of the Ocean Beach Pier, a new Oak Park branch library, park and library improvements across the city, and a whole lot more. Now, everyone knows that homelessness is taking a major priority and focus in this administration, and the city is poised to receive between $25 and $30 million from the state's Homelessness Housing Assistance and Prevention Program, often known as HAP, which helps us to open and run shelters, many of which you've joined me at as we've opened those in recent weeks and months, to fund other efforts to address homelessness in our community. Another thing to point out is $19 million for a youth and workforce initiative that we call Employ and Empower. It's helping us to build the future workforce here at the city through paid internships in all of our city departments, helping disadvantaged youth to get a toehold in a steady, stable, and rewarding career in public service. It's really cool to see some of these young people showing up here at City Hall doing the work, and I'm hopeful they'll stay an entire career here at the city. Lord knows that we need them helping to address services in our community. And I also want to point out this is not just about dollars and cents, although those are very important. It's also about making sure we're advancing sound state and federal policies that benefit San Diego. I would tell you that Care Court, I believe, is the major success of our last legislative session up in Sacramento. Many of you may recall that during my State of the City address last January, I called for state action on mental and behavioral health. Governor Newsom brought forward a bold proposal known as Care Court, which is a concrete step in the right direction to getting those suffering from extreme mental illness the help and support that they need to get off the streets. On public safety and gun violence prevention, we're seeing San Diego as a leader across the state and across the country, thanks to the city attorney's gun violence prevention unit, which has been held up as a model by Attorney General Rob Bonta and his new statewide unit to curb gun violence. And we're pleased to secure $1 million in state funding last year to help support this program. I'm also very proud of the city's sponsored legislation that was included in a major package of state bills to address gun violence, namely Assembly Bill 2239, authored by our very own State Assembly member Brian Mainshine. This restricted persons convicted of senior and child abuse from owning a firearm for a period of 10 years. Now, rest assured, this is not mission accomplished, far from. We will continue doing the work that we need to do. I intend to make sure that we use our clout at the state and federal levels to enact policy changes that will help us here at home. Most notably, the focus the year ahead will be around mental health and substance abuse. While we have made some progress on the state level with regard to conservatorship reform, I want to thank State Senator Susan Eggman for her incredible leadership on authoring a host of bills on this matter. But not all of these bills were successful in the last legislative session. And Susan Eggman and I are undaunted in our effort to pursue additional changes to the state's conservatorship laws. We see far too many people who are clearly not capable of caring for themselves, and yet we've fooled ourselves into thinking that they're not a threat to themselves or to others. That just doesn't make any sense. Laws need to be changed. Again, progress was made this year, but we're not there yet. The city and our advocates in Sacramento will be back at the table next year asking the state to take action. I'm optimistic that they will do that. In closing, I appreciate the opportunity to highlight all of this progress because I believe that San Diegans share my sense that this city should be getting stuff done, and we can't do that without reaching beyond our city limits and seeking out additional resources. And so I want to give my extreme thanks to our government affairs team who is here. Again, not the folks you see often out in the community. They're often at their desks making sure that we're being persistent, making phone calls, harassing people, making sure they know that San Diego wants this done. And what you're hearing today is that those calls are getting returned. We are getting stuff done, and we have the stats to prove it. I want to wrap up by just highlighting a couple things that will be coming up in the month ahead that I'd like you to know about. Next week, the City Council will consider the new zero-emission municipal building and operations policy and revisions to our sustainable building policy. This will chart the city's course to transition 400 natural gas burning buildings and 4,000 fleet vehicles to electric in order to reach our ambitious climate action plan goals. Later this month, the City Council will receive an update on efforts to revitalize this property, our Civic Center. Many of you obviously have been watching this closely. We have begun the process of declaring this surplus property and inviting the opportunity for folks to partner with the city to re-envision this place as something much more dynamic, energetic, and reflective of the greatness of the city. The goal, of course, will be high-quality office space for our city employees and a whole lot of affordable housing for San Diegans that need it. Again, that update will go before the City Council later this month. As many of you also know, I've convened a committee of civic leaders to help provide public engagement on this. Hope that you'll encourage your viewers, your listeners, your readers to participate in that process as we advance this effort to, again, bring transformational change at this site at the center of our downtown area. And finally, on homelessness off of our streets and into care, I look forward to providing you additional information on progress in those areas. We certainly need it, and we're certainly getting it done. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions that folks may have. Kelly.
This week is when we started reinstating the policy of ordering folks to take down their tents during the day. It generated a lot of criticism. Some people, though, they think the policy is a good policy and should be enacted. I guess what would you say to people about whether or not this is what is the main goal of this policy?
The goal is to avoid what happened in 2017 when we had large homeless encampments that caused the spread of hepatitis, ultimately killing 20 people. We can't forget the lessons of 2017. I know that folks often want to be forward-looking, never looking backwards, but doing that risks repeating this kind of stuff going forward. That can't happen. We have successfully avoided additional public health emergencies like that. Shigellosis happened last year. The city's lessons learned from 2017 meant that no one died in that outbreak, and we're not going to forget that. So the answer to those folks who may be critical of this is please consider this in its entirety. What you've seen is a dramatic upscaling of the city's response to homelessness, 38% increase in the number of available shelter beds in our community, much more utilization of them, occupancy rates north of 90, 95% on some days. So as the city has provided additional resources of outreach, of shelter, and of housing for homeless individuals, there is a responsibility for individuals to accept that assistance. And while we work with them to transition off the streets, we have to make sure that the situation on the streets is hygienic and it's safe. Without the ability to ask people to clear their materials out of the way during the daylight hours, not during inclement weather, we risk having another kind of public health emergency that could risk people's lives, and that can't happen. So we'll do this stuff. We'll do it compassionately. We'll lead with outreach. We'll make sure that we're offering people assistance wherever possible. But ultimately, we do need folks to be partners with us in the community to make sure that we avoid the kinds of stuff that we've experienced in the city in the past. I will not lose sight of that lesson learned. We will not repeat those past mistakes.
I have like 4 questions.
Go for it.
I mean, last week, and I haven't had a chance to ask you to be able to publicly address this, but Bill Walton came out very publicly and basically blamed you for the problem of homelessness in San Diego. What is your response to that?
My office provided a response last week. Stand by those comments. I will simply draw people's attention to what we're doing. Some of those comments were suggesting that nothing's going on. That's the furthest thing from the truth. In fact, let's just call it what it is, which is a lie. We have increased shelter capacity. We have expanded street outreach. We're building more affordable housing. It's not enough, but what you're not hearing from me is that we're all done in this space. What we're saying, we're doing more. We're going to our federal and state partners and asking for additional dollars. We're asking for the kinds of policy reforms that allow us to address those acute cases that concern all of us. And lastly, I'll just say that the frustrations that people are expressing are understandable. I'm frustrated as well. But the difference is you can't allow that frustration to lead to inaction and to actually make the situation worse. What we have to do is funnel that frustration and that energy towards progress. I will be back here again and again, continuing to expand all of the things that we know that work, continue to pester our partners at the county, state, and federal level to provide assistance and resources. But we got more work to do. And I think importantly, this is not unique to San Diego. Every mayor in this country is dealing with this particular problem. But what I hope people feel here in San Diego is that you have a mayor and a city council that are leaning in on this matter. We're doing more than we ever have. Is it enough? No. That's why we're going to continue doing the work that we do. And I look forward to reporting back to you and to the public about the progress we're making.
I mean, I don't recall any other mayor getting hit this hard with this problem. Why do you think that you continue to be sort of targeted for this, being blamed for this?
Well, welcome to the job of being mayor. This job causes you to be held accountable for everything. I have a sign on my desk that says the buck stopped here. And I get that. You're held accountable for things you did. You get accountable for things you didn't do, things you have nothing to do with, things that are other people's problems. But I'm here. I'm present. I'm in San Diego every day. I'm accessible to folks. We're here right now talking. I'm walking up and down these streets. I'm at community events. And so you're accessible. And that's okay. I signed up for this job. I wanted this job. I'm happy to have this job. And I accept the accountability that comes with it. But ultimately, you have to, facts have to be said, right? On this issue of homelessness, you all did reporting about the fact that there were people protesting in front of my home for the feeling as though we're being too aggressive with the homelessness, right? And that's when that shooting happened in front of my house because people were protesting in front of it, saying I was doing too much when it comes to homelessness. And then you have other people saying we're not doing enough. Both can't be true.
One last thing about it, though. So my understanding, though, is as far as parks go, it falls under a different municipal code than dealing with streets downtown. What's going to be done with Balboa Park?
Mm-hmm.
Bill Walton was complaining specifically about the campus there. What's being done to cut down on the large number of homeless that are living in Balboa Park?
So we have a Balboa Park team. Police officers that are dedicated in the park. You may see them occasionally riding ATVs and other electric vehicles around the park trying to provide the presence, not just for homelessness, but just for law and order in the park. Obviously, the park is our crown jewel. We need to be safe. We want folks and families, tourists, San Diegans alike, to enjoy their experiences there. And that team does a good job. Obviously, when it comes to the issue of homelessness, it's often a situation where folks are dynamic. They are in one part of the park one day, another part the next. We'll continue doing that work. I believe that we have both the city attorney and council members who are looking at our existing laws and seeing if they're clear enough. Sometimes there are some vagueness there that deserves clarifying. Other cities have done that, and so there may be some work that we can do there. Kelly, I would also say that some of the rules around the way that we handle occupation of the public realm probably need some looking at. Some of the legal settlements that we have in this space are old. They reflect a different time. Homelessness has changed dramatically in the last 10 years, maybe even less than that, last couple of years. The size of the population, its presence, not just in downtown, but really in every corner of the city. The introduction of fentanyl and opioids has really definitely changed the situation. And so I think that there's a need to take a look at all of this stuff. The problem is none of this stuff is doable overnight. Like, a lot of things take some time. And I guess that's what's different here is this commitment to come back again and again, to stay persistent, to stay at the table, to drive this change. Look at what we're doing with the Central Library, old Central Library, right? Who'd have thought we'd had to go to court to argue to use our own building as a homeless shelter? Yeah, that's what we have to do. Previous administrations just threw up their hands and didn't do anything about it. This administration is staying at the table. We're showing up in court. We're saying we're going to put this to use because we got to put homeless people off our streets and into shelters. So what you're hearing from me is a willingness to be persistent, to take a look at stuff not as it's always been done, but asking if it needs to be done a different way. And again, when we make changes or we make progress on this, much like the tent policy this week, we will report out to the public about the changes that we're making and hopefully see the results that we expect. If we don't see results, we'll change course. If we see results, we'll double down and try and get more results for San Diegans.
The hours, just so I'm sure they
Mhm.
take it down between 6 a.m. and 9 p.m.? Or what?
I believe that's right. 6, yeah. Okay, thank you. You want us, Art?
I have two questions. One about the numbers today.
Mhm.
So what you outlined today was an increase that looked like about $80 million in new money this year, plus the homelessness money, other money. Should be over $100 million that's new money. Given that, what do you say to people that are concerned about Measure B that would impose a new charge to homeowners, a lot of people in underserved communities, low-income communities, for trash pickup? People's ordinance, for over 100 years, has not charged them. With this new money, which is twice the amount that it costs per year for that additional trash pickup, does this take some pressure off the city to then not have to report Measure B, add that new, which is not free, right? People pay for it in the property taxes. But what do you say to underserved communities when you get all this new money and you're still trying to collect new money on trash pickup?
I think the connection between those two is very tenuous, Art. What we're saying today is that the state and federal governments have provided specific kinds of funding for things that are specific, like water, like homelessness, like public safety, and we are going out and capturing those dollars and bringing them here. Those are not necessarily renewable resources. Some of the stuff is one time. That's why we have to keep this team around to make sure that these dollars are renewed. That's a very different situation than whether or not we have the resources to properly pick up garbage and recyclables in this community, whether or not we're meeting our obligations under new requirements around composting and green waste recycling, and whether or not we can provide a better, higher level of service or keep it as status quo, or maybe need to adjust downward. These are maybe related in the sense that you're talking about dollars and cents, but these dollars are necessarily usable for trash collection, recycling collection, and whatnot.
I understand. Yeah. So, the second question, you just said that you're the mayor, you're accessible. You may know, I saw you yesterday at an event in the German field. Are you aware that I was kicked out of that event before you arrived, by your staff and by the director of real estate assets? I was there. I'm also a pilot. I go to that facility when you're not there. I was there was an event. I didn't interact with anybody. I was just watching. Two of your staff asked the tenant to ask the press to leave. I was the only press member there.
Mm-hmm.
It was a publicly owned airport. Everybody there was on the public clock. It was in an open space where other people could see it. I was the only person asked to leave. So when you talk about being accessible and being open, do you think it's proper to have the press have to leave an event where it was city business being conducted? It wasn't a private event. It wasn't a wedding. One of your staffers compared it to a private wedding.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, did they tell you that, or were you aware that I was kicked out? I said hi to you on the way out. I'd already been kicked out.
On the way in.
Your way in, I was already on the way out.
Ah.
I'd already been kicked out. Do you think it's appropriate that the press be denied access to an event where city employees are having an open event? It was not in secret. I didn't break in anywhere. I happen to be the only press there, but if anybody else had been there, do you think it's fair that the press not be allowed there?
Well, Art, I don't know who talked to you or said what. I didn't direct anybody to do anything. That wasn't a public meeting. That was a staff event for one of our city departments. We had others. This is October is Employee Appreciation Month. We've had multiple of these events. I haven't seen a lot of press interest in me expressing my appreciation to our city staff for the work that they're doing, which is what we did.
We were invited. Nobody was informed. The press was not informed that you had that event to go.
Well, maybe you can invite me to your employee appreciation party. I'd be happy to go.
Well, the difference is you're on paid dollars. You're taxpayer dollars. It's not the same thing, right? When you guys act like you have a private company, and this is public staffers. And so it wasn't a closed event. It was at a publicly owned airport, right?
Okay.
Your staff didn't pay for the use of the venue. They just used it. And then I was the only person kicked out. There were pilots arriving there in their airplanes. Nobody else was forced to leave except the press.
Okay.
I don't understand why. I'm asking you if you think it's appropriate. Your staff, your director of community engagement, ironically, didn't want to engage with the community. She's the one that told me it was a private event like a wedding. And the director of your dream team specifically told the tenant to kick me out.
Okay.
Do you think that's appropriate? Do you think the press should only be allowed to events where you personally invite us to attend, or do you think there's a limit as to where the press can cover what you do?
Well, let me be clear for the media outlets who are here. This is an employee appreciation event. It's an internal meeting of city employees to try and boost morale. I'm not sure whether it's open or closed press. I don't know. It's not common to have media at these events. You were there. Did you receive an invitation to that meeting? Someone inform you it was happening?
I did, yeah.
Who was that?
Somebody there at the FBO, one of the tenants.
One of the tenants. Okay. Okay.
And so, but it's not a closed venue, right? It's not secure. I was the only person asked to leave.
Well, I'm sorry that you.
Your staff is the one who did it.
Okay.
So next time, you think it's appropriate? Because next time I won't leave and wait to get arrested.
Okay.
And we'll see if there's a First Amendment violation. But it just seems so weird that your staff wants to be so secretive about something that is on the dime. 50 people. And we talk about your climate action plan.
Uh huh.
You had 50 people forced to drive there, right?
Okay.
There was an optional attendance. They were told to
Well,
be
apparently
there.
51 showed up.
Okay, well, 50, I didn't see anybody bike there.
Okay, well, did you ask?
Yeah, I was there when people arrived.
All right, I don't think
Single
these are
person
serious
biked
questions.
there.
I
So,
appreciate your time.
What I'm saying is, Mayor, is that
You want to be involved. Please tell me. You look uncomfortable. Yeah, nor should you, because it's kind of foolish, right? We are here right now. We're here right now.
our job is not to only show up when you invite us. Like you said, you walk down the street. If we're not invited, we see you on the street, are we not allowed to ask you questions?
And I can choose whether or not to answer them. But my point of the matter
I didn't
is,
ask you any questions yesterday, did I? When you arrived, I didn't confront you.
this,
Where did you get kicked out?
we weren't hosting a press conference, Mark. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings the end of our time together. Thank you very much. We'll see you next month.